This table is a modern/minimalist mashup, and I wanted to use materials that would help accentuate the hard lines and right angles. So I'm building this piece with 5/4 white oak and 8/4 walnut. The other benefit of using such contrasting woods is that it elevates the joinery and enhances that kind of floating illusion of the center shelf. So first I needed to rough out my lumber, and since 85% of this table will be 3/4 material, I decided to resaw my walnut at the bandsaw before milling everything down to its final thickness. So with the resaw blade installed, I got to work. Once I had my tree slices slimmed down, I ripped them to their final width at the table saw. A good thing is that most of these pieces are going to be the same width, so I could set the fence once and run all my boards through. And speaking of dimensions, if you want to purchase detailed plans of this piece, I'll have them linked down in the description. With my crosscut blade installed in my table saw, I got started by cutting the tenon-ended boards to their final length. The two outer case sides and the inner vertical boards will get miters, while the remaining pieces will receive tenons for stop dados, or half-line dados. Tomato, tomato. For crosscuts, I tend to bounce between a miter gauge and a sled, but since a few of these boards are on the longer side, I cut all these pieces with the sled since it gives me more support. One thing that I find helpful with long cuts is hold down clamps, but that might not be necessary if you have a wider sled. And you always have the option to cut these boards with a miter saw. I just think that my table saw is more accurate. So next up are those long miters. Now, long miters can be as scary as that "I have an idea" text from your wife, you know the one. But I think this process works out really well. To start, I mark out the miter at its final length, since I don't have to worry about the inside dimension at this point, as long as my overall lengths are correct. And to cut the pieces, I like to use a miter sled. And a miter sled happens to be the best way that I've found to cut miters. I made this sled a little longer and wider than I normally do to allow for more of the workpiece to index against the fence, which results in a clean and square miter joint. Just make sure to consider the tenon when marking and cutting out your workpieces, as cutting too short here could be a killer come assembly time. So next up is the stop dado. I used a 1/2 inch bit in my router to cut the dados, stopping 1/2 inch from the front of the table. This leaves me plenty of room for my tenon notch later on. I like using this T-square from Woodpeckers to mark out the layout lines. And if you want to learn more about these tools and if they're worth the money, check out my video on Woodpeckers tools linked in the card above. So with my marks laid out and my bit set to 1/4 inch, I got to work routing in the dados. I like this attachment for my router as it allows me to use the track from my track saw as a guide, though you could just clamp a board to your workpiece and get the same result. I just find this method to be more controlled. Not all the cuts can be made in the same direction on the workpiece, so a plunge router really comes in handy when needing to start at the stop dado end of the cut. Oh, and if you're wondering about this bit, I'm using a 1/2 inch spiral downcut bit here. This gives me clean edges on the top of my dado and pushes the wood chips down into the cut. Now, a few of the measurements needed to be transferred to the other side of the workpiece, since I could only index off the mitered edge. So I used a few squares to help me wrap the mark around the workpiece and lay out the stop dados. And if you're enjoying this project, please give this video a like. I appreciate the love and your support goes a long way. Thank you. Next up was the bottom chamfer for the tabletop, and chamfers go on the front and two sides while the back gets unchamfered or remains chamferless. While you could use a router for this operation, I like using a table saw a little more. I feel like it gives me more control over where the chamfer is placed and has less room for error. But let me know your preferred method for cutting chamfers in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I set up a dado stack and a stop on my sled that meets right at the end of the blade to cut the tenons. After a few test cuts to get the blade height set, I ran all my boards through. And while this isn't a super hard procedure, I think it's important to note that keeping consistent pressure on the boards is important so you don't get any deviation on your tenon. To make the tenons fit properly into the dado, I need to cut a 3/4 inch notch out of the front facing shoulder. This notch allows for enough space to clear the rounded edge left from the router bit in the dado, leaving me with a really clean looking joint that is also quite strong. To cut the notch, I placed a 3/4 inch mark on the front edge of the board, and used a pull saw to cut the shoulder, stopping just before hitting bottom. The remaining material could then be removed with the table saw using a crosscut sled. If you want to see more fun projects like this one, hit that subscribe button. I release new project videos every few weeks, so stay tuned. And thanks for the support. Anyone who has glued up miters can tell you what a pain it is to get them to line up. So I added a few dominoes to the joints to keep things aligned and give them better support for the glue up. So with the domino set to 45, I popped a few mortises into my mitered corners. Next, it was time to deal with any tiny knots or voids in the timber. I like using Starbond CA glue since they have great color options and is really quick to apply. I'll have a discount code in the description along with a full list of supplies if you want to try them out. For the glue up, I decided to assemble the table in one go rather than break it down into multiple sessions. Now, the advantage here is that everything's easier to put together as one piece. The disadvantage is that there's a lot of pieces to clamp and glue. So time was a major factor and I had to move pretty quickly to get everything together. Thankfully, the joints all lined up like the coming of Aquarius, and I got the case together even if it meant using every F-style clamp I own. With the clamps removed, I went ahead and added a small chamfer to the top of the table. I would usually round something like this over, but I felt like the angled edge played well off the hard lines in this piece. But let me know what you think. From there, I gave all my pieces a final sanding up to 220. Just be careful to hand sand the fronts so you don't round them over with the random orbit. Then I could move on to the finish. The finish I'm using is a hard wax oil, which I love because it's plant-based, easy to apply, and easy to repair should the piece need it. I just wipe it on, let it sit for about 15 minutes, then wipe off the excess. Then I repeat the process one more time. This modern console table is both functional and elegant, and not to mention it's built to last a lifetime. Subscribe for more woodworking projects that last and share this video with your friends. Watch this video next for another awesome project, and I'll see you next time.